I think oftentimes people sort of associate with me with doing all things curly, and I think it's really important to distinguish that there are a lot of color techniques that are transferable between curly as well as straight. So if we look at my model over here, Aneshka, come on over, sweetheart. This is a color technique that I did using brand new colors that have launched from the Matrix brand that are living in the ash and gold and neutral family. I love that combination because we oftentimes as colorists think, well, gosh, if you put ash and gold together, doesn't that just make natural? But it actually makes like a really beautiful beige. So it's giving you the best of like all of those worlds. And I love that we can create these unique patterns of like just still having some depth and natural color live and lighter pieces illuminating from the mid-shafts down. She allowed me to really do a very exaggerated fringe on her, which just sort of set off just having that depth at the root. And I'm here doing it on my friend Reba, and she has type 1 hair. So type 1 straight hair, maybe a slight wave, no wave at all. So just very, very straight, but also just even if it's not going to be such a severe fringe, curtain bangs. Curtain bangs are very on trend, and really just thinking about placement, thinking about where it's going to be. So that's what I'm going to do on her, and she's sectioned for that. And I'm going to get started and toss the baton to you, Nick.
All right. So what I am going to be doing is focusing on a color technique. So I already did the color on her. It looks really beautiful and shiny in the beautiful copper tones. But I also want to bring this lovely model up here. Come on up here. So it's the same exact technique, but it has 2 different placements. So the idea here is, as you can see with her hair, it's very, very soft, very blended. Almost could look like there's no color in there, as if maybe she was in the sun and it just kind of lightened her up a little bit. Very different end results, same technique. So take almost like a football shaped section on the top of the head. When you're working with someone who wants to see just a little bit of lightness, the football becomes bigger and bigger. When you're working with somebody who wanted to see a lot more dimension, you bring that football up really tight and small so that you can build off of it, and then you have a small veil that hangs over it of the depth going into the lightness, versus here where we have focused on keeping most of her natural dark tones, but then adding a little bit of lightness through the perimeter line. So I'm going to take you through how I did that.
I heard the word football and I was like, what is
Football.
that? But I think
about
I
football.
know, yes, I think I know what a football looks like, so I'm at a win right now. We have Ariana here who has quintessential to me just what a lot of people want to see, just very thick, long, luscious hair. Right now I'm dragging a lot of inspiration from like late 90s Jennifer Aniston, that like really long layered, super sleek and straight. What I think is really interesting is that while we celebrate texture and I'm wearing my hair natural, I think now we're really in a place where people are wanting to utilize their hair to create all different kinds of styles. So we are starting to see this resurgence of like this like really lanky kind of straight hair that's like been tucked behind the ear, and you can see I created that like effect with it. Now before I create a new texture on her hair, I want to show you some of my quick tips on what I do to finish this style. I worked with everyone from Chrissy Teigen, Hailey Bieber, Ashley Graham, and whenever I do a straight style, the thing that really kind of sets it apart, one is the part is in the center. That sounds really rudimentary, but if you really think about it, when you think about like, you know, beauty is math, math is beauty, if it's dead center, it really does change how the eye perceives the hairstyle, especially if you're doing a style that is really simple. Second, I like to do, I've shown this many times, a flyaway brush. You can use an old kabuki brush, an old makeup brush. I like it better than a toothbrush, to be honest, and I'm gonna use the Kenra Volume Spray. Are there any Kenra fans in the house? Because Kenra Volume Spray, yes. My family's here.
Those
Hello.
2 people over there.
Yeah. These people are here. So I'm going to spray the volume spray directly on this kabuki brush. And what I do is I just go ahead and finish out any little flyaways. This is great especially for, I'm Puerto Rican, so whenever I blow out like anyone like that has my hair texture, you get those little antennas that tend to lay up. However, like a lot of times, like my mom especially is like, I don't want product, don't spray product. So I spray the product onto the brush and I just knock down these little flyaways, and it just really creates a little bit more of an elevated finish that feels a little bit more put together. You can also use it around the hairline. Now that we're saw my little tips on it being straight, because she looks so gorgeous, also she's wearing a full head of extensions, which we love, I'm going to create what I call beach waves. This is like beach waves reimagined, because I think we use that term so loosely. But friends, I have not seen anyone leave the beach ever with the kind of waves that we create under the hashtag beach waves. So what does that mean? I wanted to really emulate what that naturally wavy hair does, and underneath there's always a flatter wave because there's not really much of a coil happening because there's hair laying on top. Also, we have a lot of grit from the sand. We have that texture from the salt in the ocean. And the ends of the hair have been touching the body, which are hopefully covered in some sort of sunscreen or suntan lotion, and so the ends get really, really piecey. So I want to recreate what that looks like, and this is really kind of elevating that beachy hair look, especially going into summer, which is so special for your clients that do want to wear their hair natural and just let it air dry. Little quick tips and tricks that you can share with them to be able to just elevate and optimize their natural hair texture. And I'm going to go ahead and begin the sectioning underneath. I'm going to be using a flat iron, and I'm going to be using a flat tap technique. As I pass it over to Michelle, you'll see what I'm doing. It's just a quick flat tap, and that's going to be a more collapsed wave. I don't want to have too much volume underneath.
All right. So I am just putting a few foils around the face. It's less about me wanting to teach you guys how to foil hair, because we all know how to do that. And it's more about placement and why we put things where we put it. So I'm doing a couple very, very fine baby lights around the hairline here. The idea is you want to make sure you're going all the way up to the hairline as thin of a section as possible. A lot of times when someone wants to see that brightness around the face and we're moving too fast as colorists, we grab too big of a section, and as soon as she pulls her hair back in that ponytail, she feels like she has an outgrowth. So make sure that you're taking really, really baby fine sections. When you lay it into your hand, you can see right through it, then go in with a really fine baby light through that section. That's how I placed the foils around the hairline on this particular model. Same sectioning, but on this particular model, what I did was I backcombed the hairline so that there was no harsh lines or highlights going all the way up to the hairline. So understanding what your client wants. This particular client said, I want to really see that brightness all the way up, almost touching my skin. This client is saying to me, I just want it to look like it was sun-kissed and have a little bit of lightness around the face. So going back to back here with a few foils, I'm going to do 2 foils around the hairline that I'm going to do really fine weaves. And then behind them, I'm going to do fine slices, really fine slices that you could see right through. But that's going to give it a little bit more punch of a pop of color around her face, and it's going to still create that softness. So the baby lights creates the softness. The foil that is a slice behind it gives you that pop of color that you want behind it. On her hairline is all backcombed, and it is all very soft gradation of color. So same technique, but done 2 different ways.
So I will piggyback on that whole concept about working in the fringe area, because a lot of us hear about money pieces all day long. And when you are associating money pieces with the cut, you also want to think about the texture type that you're working on. So for a straight-haired person that might be wearing that curtain bang that I talked about earlier and wanting to live again in that blonde family, I also am utilizing some slicing or almost what you would consider color blocking in a way. But however, when you are creating a color blocking situation or slices around the frame of the face, it's important to not take very thick sections. So you'll see, even if I want to have more of a presence in my slices, they will still be extraordinarily thin, paper thin, but I will do 2 or 3 of them back to back. Now, when you think about light color living beside depth, whether it's a shadow root or a root tap, whether it's an inch out, 2 or 3 or 4 inches out, what makes lighter tones so special is the fact that it's actually living or being presented by something that is darker. So that's what you want to sort of set off or sort of present. So what I like to do is take a back-to-back foil of slices and make that my lighter tone, whether it's lightener, high lift color, and then right behind it in one thin veil of a slice, take my secondary color, which again, I'm staying within that same color family. So I talked to you guys about using the neutral gold ashes. So if I have my deeper tone living in a 6 versus a 9, which is ultimately what the toner will be, my darker tone is what this slice will live at. So this is my 6NGA, and this will create just a very subtle veil when she wears either that curtain fringe or what you see here on Aneshka where it's curly, there's still a bold presence in that fringe, but it's still very intermingled, still in a very bold way, with the color sort of marrying together. Always with a root tap. I am an advocate for having that depth at the root and having the color sort of just ooze out from, maybe that's not the best word, ooze.
I'm going to start saying, I want my color to ooze out.
Okay, I was trying to think of something that just sounded yummy. Ooze could be good. However, just the color sort of just like cascading out of that beautiful depth. Almost like what you look at a flower and you look at the base of it, how it's got that beautiful depth on the inside. It's just aesthetically very pleasing. Don't make fun of me.
No, I'm definitely using the oozing. I feel like I use food a lot as an analogy.
Food?
Food. I'm like, I want it to be like a buttery blonde, almost like a, what's that cookie that's like a sand pecan cookie? It's like, I want it to look like that. And yeah, exactly. I got the same exact look from the person I was telling. So I'm going to go ahead and continue adding a little bit more texture. So part of this is I am using two tools. I'm using a flat iron, I'm using a curling iron. So what I want to do is make sure that anywhere the hair is naturally going to be collapsed with weight on top, I'm creating a flat wave or I'm creating a very soft S wave. How many of us feel comfortable creating S waves with a flat iron? There's a couple hands. Okay, well I have some hot tips for you. So I say this often, I'm a Harry Potter nerd. This is just how I am, it's who I am. And I always say that this is like my wand, and whatever I do with it, no matter like the little movements that I make with it, will make a huge impact. What I mean by that is that when I'm creating an S-wave pattern, the amount of tension that I'm putting on the hair, how long I hold it there, how quickly I move it through the section is going to really dictate the kind of wave I'm creating, but then also if I'm going to create any kinks in the hair, because I know sometimes that tends to be the issue. So what I want to do is I'm creating an S-wave. I'm just going to first heat up that first overpass. I'm going to pinch the section in my other hand, and I'm barely closing the iron. I'm barely closing it. I'm just letting it rock back and forth, just like that, to create that really nice, soft, big, open wave. And of course, a lot of people like to use the triple barrels, but I prefer to use a flat iron only because I can alternate. I can then make on the next section a really, really tight ripple and create a lot of that multi-texture that I'm looking for. Then as I get up towards above the occipital bone where the hair is a little bit more free and where it would naturally want to react to the humidity, this is where I'm going to use my curling iron to also create different textures. So we know about the concept of a curling iron. Yes, we do. By the way, are we Marcel or like clip or a wand house? Marcel, I heard Marcel. Wand. It's split evenly. I'm into it. So I'm going to tell you, when you're using a Marcel or a clip iron, two important things to keep in mind, because I do watch stylists often that want to recreate some of the looks that I do, and I watch them curl, and it seems like, you got to the end of the service, you cut their hair, you colored it, and you're just like, yeah, la, 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 I'm just curling, wanding. But again, it's Harry Potter's wand. So everything you do when it comes to the tension as you're releasing is going to make a big difference. So right here, as I'm putting in the hair to the iron, I'm going to go ahead and have a lot of tension as I release, really collapse that shape, and create a really small twist. This is going to give me a really tight ripple wave that's going to feel a lot more organic and natural versus letting it bounce out all the way. Sometimes what I even do is while it's still warm, I'll just keep collapsing it even more so it turns into this. And I'll show you right away, while it's in my hand, what kind of wave that gives you. It's just a much more organic wave that just looks a little bit more real and kind of emulates a natural wave texture. So of course, with a curled iron, I can create big curls, I can create just what we call beach waves now, but I want to make sure that I'm creating a really collapsed wave texture that then at the end, I can finish out with some product to really make it feel fully lived in. The other thing I want to talk about is what I call hair contouring. So I'm working a little bit backwards, but essentially what that means is that as I get to the front of the hair, I want this face framing piece, whether or not she has curtain bangs or face framing layers, I want it to open up following that eye line, just like that, if you look in the monitor. Then what I want is when you see that's open there, this hair right here has the potential to frame her face. What is this doing to her face? It's opening up that cheekbone and it's cutting in that jawline. So you have the potential with someone's hair to really kind of contour the shape of their face, especially for some of us, me included, that ate a lot of things I shouldn't be eating during the last 2 years. I wear wigs for that reason. So that hair contouring trick is a really great thing because it is something that when you finish the client and you turn them around in the chair, they're like, whoa, why do I look so good? That's going to be one of the reasons why you're kind of being mindful of that curling technique.
I love that, David. I think a lot of people do that without knowing that they're doing that.
Yeah, totally.
All right. So I've just finished the hairline. Just to give you guys a recap of what I did on this particular model, we did some baby lights that is leaning against the skin, and then right behind it, some slices to give it a little bit more punch behind the hairline. Then I'm starting to go in with the hair that's left all the way between my section that's sectioned out on top and my previous foils, is starting to do teasy lights in there. Now, this is where you can control the amount of lightness that you get. Obviously, we have a lot more lightness here. You can see, because I pre-colored her before, that some of her highlights go all the way up, and then some are focused on more of that mid-length and ends. On this particular model, everything lived right here. Everything lived towards that mid-lengths and ends. Nothing is really bold. It's very soft. She's one that's just like, I don't like a lot of color. I just want it to look like there's some dimension, some shine when the light hits it. So she's going to be all teasy lights, where we're here going to have the combination. So it's really about not so much the technique as it is about where you place the color. And it's not so much about how many foils you put in the hair. It's how purposeful you are in the place that you actually put the foils in. So, you know, it was interesting. We were talking earlier on another stage, and you know, people have been asking me a lot on, like, how do you price for different highlighting techniques and things like that. And I'm a firm believer that when someone comes into your chair, they're sitting in your chair for your expertise, and what you're able to get is the end result. Historically, anybody who's been in this business a long time, we happen to have trained, if anybody was just foil users for a long time and not doing any of this freehand color, we trained our consumer to think that a full head of foil was one price, a half head of foil was another, and then individual foils was another price. So it's about now training those habits into having more of the conversations around, we're going to create this complete look. I'm going to be adding multi-dimensional color in there, and whether it takes me an hour or 3 hours, the goal is to get you the end result you want, and how I get there is going to be based on the expertise that I have, not necessarily how to drive it to a certain price point. So think about that when you're pricing out your services, is that number one, are you customizing the color placement and the technique in the chair for the person who is sitting in your chair, or are you doing the same thing over and over again? Chances are, if you're doing the same thing over and over again, they can get that anywhere. So when you think about how many amazing colorists there are in the world, how are you making sure that you're keeping your guest in the chair for years and years and years to come? And it's by continuously reinventing their look, continuously changing up what the placement of their color is, their cut, and their style, and listening to them. You know, as we become friends with our clients, sometimes we stop listening, and we just listen to the great vacations and the kids and all those types of things. But when's the last time you really had a strong consultation about reinventing their look if they've been coming to you for a long time? So think about them, because the number one reason why somebody leaves and goes to another salon is because their friend talked about this great experience they had with another colorist where they made them feel really special. So you always have to make people feel special.
Yeah, that's very important. I would say that when you think about like successful stylists, or you think about maybe you yourself, like why do clients come back? Obviously, you're helping them with their hair and you're making them feel good, but how do you make that sustainable? So it's really challenging often about, like, you know what, are you happy with your hair? Do you want to change? I have had gotten clients that are like, I've seen my hairdresser for 20 years. I feel so bad I'm sitting in your chair, but I felt too bad to tell them that I wanted something new because I always got the same thing over and over. So we talk about this a lot as a team about, like, how do we keep that conversation up with our clients and keep seeing them as humans again? Like, where are you in your life? How are you feeling about it? Is there something you don't like? So that comfort level is really important. It's really interesting working with celebrities where that conversation happens all the time. You know, it's like every week there's like a new personality there. So I'm like, oh, okay, we're going to be this person today. So let that kind of experience trickle down into, you know, working behind the chair as well.
So I'm over here continuing on, and I'll just sort of bring the final product of what happened in her fringe area. Basically, I continued on that pattern of slices, and the last final couple of foils ended in a V parting on the top, and back to back, those were the deeper tone, because that will still be a very thin veil sort of cascading over everything. And what I love, one, is just sort of just being able to be exposed to education and see that, you know, how you do things, someone else does it some other kind of way, or just sort of expanding how you look at what you can put together. So even though I did more of a detailed, like definitive parting and sectioning on the fringe, on the sides was more of a balayage freehand paint. I also like to use mesh in terms of my medium for how I incubate the color. You know, when you think about things like tools that you have access to, like foil versus mesh versus film. It's so important to even understand how that helps you with timing versus how much lift you're going to get because of the incubation. I think about it a lot because I am constantly sort of juggling what is the texture type that I'm working on. I think in those terms. Is it straight? Is it wavy? Is it curly? How much can the hair take? How strong can the developer be? How much time do I have to get through this density of hair? So when we look at Aneshka and we see where like her color lives, I like to call this almost like her towers, where again, it wasn't that traditional money piece because there is nothing that she's flipping side to side in her fringe. However, there is a lot of illumination here, but if we turn her to the back, we'll see like almost like this very gradient, almost unintentional ombre look that still gives her depth, still gives her a very lived-in look. It doesn't make her high maintenance, but it also just at the same time beautifully presents and enhances her face and her color. So when I'm on the side of Riva right here, I'm going in with that very balayage freehand technique. We all understand concepts like surface painting versus full saturation. I am not a fan of the board. I know people are artists with that board, holding it in the hand and sort of painting it. I feel clumsy. And so do what feels right to you. Do what sort of allows you to be your best artist. So I know that I like to use my hands. I like to feel the hair. I like to feel the foil. So I will have a pressure point where I hold the hair taut, sort of paint, kneading, using that pressure, using that tension, and then I'll lay it on mesh or foil. So I'll just demonstrate a little bit of what I'm talking about here. And you see me making diagonal back partings, right? So that's all in the intention of creating that gradient, almost like an almond, where it sits lower in the back and it sits higher in the front. So a diagonal back parting. And I'm going to gather my hair, create that tension source right at where all the hair is able to be gathered. And then I'm able to go in with, again, your brush, right? So there are some people that use those very big brushes and feel like they can paint with that. But as an artist, you have to also think about your brushes and what gives you that delicate touch. And do you need a slanted brush? Do you need a ridged brush? Also know that with brushes, it's also about the type of bristles that are on it. Some bristles, like the white ones, are the most delicate and soft. When you go into like the gray and the black, there's more denseness in those bristles. So if you find that you have like a heavy hand versus a soft hand, think about the type of bristles that are in your brush. So positioning, body positioning, right? So it's me just gently, I know you can't see it, my hand's in the way, but just gliding over there, and I'm intentionally creating a diagonal, and I'm following the parting, right? So as I create more of a surface saturation in the mid-shaft, when I lay it down on the film, I could very well lay it on this film, but I'm going to take a fresh one and just lay it down still with that tension, holding. And now I'm going to create more of a full saturation, just like you would if you were painting in a foil, and it's going to live more on the ends. So couple of ways that you get full saturation is, one, increasing your developer and allowing that to lift at a quicker pace than what you have. Also, how much pressure you're putting. A light hand is going to have less saturation. A heavier hand is going to have fuller saturation. Also, a lot of people like to take the tips and just sort of glide their two fingers up and down to kind of blur, also blend, and then ensure that you have those lighter, brighter tips. So just a couple of tips for you.
I like it. It's so funny, Michelle, when you were talking about the board. I always wanted to be a colorist that could use the board. I can't. I don't know what it is.
I
It's
know.
clumsy for me, too, so it must be something with you and I both. All right. I am just doing a basic teasy light in the back of the hair now. Everything that lives below that, section that you have off the top, whether you call it a circle or a football or an eye shape, just slightly go back in, tease the hair, add the dimension back in. Make sure that when you're teasing the hair, you don't always start and stop in the same exact spot. So when I'm teasing this particular technique, some of the teasing I'll go higher with, some I'll go lower with, and then the next time when I go to the next section, I'll drop down and drop up so that the color goes higher to lower, and you'll never see where the color starts and stops through the mid-lengths and ends.
So there's a couple things that we went ahead and combed it out. If you were watching, we got that very satisfactory moment of the comb out that we all live for at the end of a styling service. It's the comb out. How many of us have recorded that? I know I have a million times. So we went ahead and finished out this look, and what I'm gonna do now is create a little bit more of that beach texture in the ends. One of my favorite things to do is to mix a serum-like hair oil. This is the Luxe Hair Oil from Kenra Platinum, one of my favorites. I'm gonna put 2 pumps in the palm of my hand. I'm gonna take volume spray. I'm gonna put it also in the palm of my hand. So the alcohol in the hairspray is gonna help dry off that oil a little bit. The serum-like consistency of the Luxe oil is gonna give me that like piecey texture that I'm looking for without having to rely on something that I'm spraying on the hair. For me, I'm very much someone that likes to work with my hands and feel the hair, so I like to squeeze product in so I can really get a sense of where it's going and how it's feeling. So this is just a little bit more of an organic finish, and you can see that we still got that pop and that wave that feels like, oh, the hair is styled, but it has a much more like true, what I would consider like almost air dried, but like what we wish hair air dried like. We have that collapsed wave on the interior, and then of course we have this really beautiful face framing here that opens up, and then this really beautiful section here that really hugs the waves. So I'm gonna have Ariana stand up, and we're gonna have a little walk, Miss Thing. Show off your hair. Everyone give it up for Ariana's beach waves.